and this is determining places 13 through 17 in the packed field of women's second varsity eights. Clark out in front early, followed by, looks like Vermont, Conn College are fighting for the second position. Mount Holyoke and Middleburry, another 3/4 of a length back. Clark has settled into 35.5 strokes a minute. Theirs is a 1/3 of a length lead over Vermont. Vermont has 1 seat on Connecticut College. Mount Holyoke another length back, and followed by a further length back to Middleburry.
About a half a length now between Vermont and Conn College. Behind Conn College, we have the boat from Mount Holyoke, and on the far side, the crew from Middleburry. Field is just starting to spread out a bit here with these crews trailing off the back. We have our crews from Middleburry and Mount Holyoke separating themselves off the back of the field, and then these two crews hanging on to one another, the Conn College and the Vermont crews. Vermont, Coxon just took a look over to see that she's got just about that boat length of lead over the Conn College crew that she would be hoping for here, and hoping to use that momentum to chase down this Clark crew. Does still look like Clark is holding about a boat length over Vermont. Clark very much just in their lane and jamming out here in lane 6. We'll want to make a special note of this 7-6 bucket. Don't see a lot of 7-6 buckets in an 8, but here we are. 3rd level final at NERC. Clark rocking that bucket, and it's working for them. Here they are out in front, looking at least a length lead over their next closest competitors in the Vermont boat. Vermont has continued to push away from Conn College. Looks like they have open water now between themselves and Conn College boat. Mount Holyoke looks like they're just holding steady here. Maybe about a half a length of open water between themselves and Conn College. But looking down the course here, we can see that crew from Clark really just in that dominant first place position in this 3rd level final. Nice conditions for these guys as they're cruising through the middle of the race course. A little bit of wind, but the water could not be flatter. So these crews are not going to be bothered much by that. Again, this story is all about this Clark crew out in front, maintaining their margin on the Vermont boat. Vermont looking like they're continuing just to open up that margin between themselves and Conn College.
Move forward.
Yeah, so as this Clark crew continues to move out on the rest of the field, this is going to be the opportunity for them just to focus in on their lane. Their work isn't done, but the hardest part of the work is really going to be over, because the pain really just doesn't hurt as much when you're out in front by this much, guys. So sitting into your seat, getting into your rhythm, working with your teammates, maybe even sneaking in a smile. Honestly, at this point in the race, when you have a margin like this, you're on your home course, you're racing with your friends, you're racing with your teammates, you can see every other boat in the race behind you. This is what it's all about. And you're rowing a 7-6 bucket. What could be better in life, guys? So here we are looking at the Clark crew dominating this 3rd level final of the women's 2v8. And really, I hope, enjoying the moment here at NERC. sending those puddles down between them and this really ever-widening gap between themselves and Vermont. Vermont also just continuing to widen the gap between themselves and Conn College. And we're well inside the last 500, so let's toss it up to the tower in for Madison.
This race at this point, as they continue to pull away from the rest of the field here. Vermont next in line, over in lane 4, doing a really nice job trying to catch up to Clark, but quite a bit of open water separating these two crews from each other. Then we have Conn College, Mount Holyoke, and Middleburry rounding out the field of this third level final for the women's second varsity 8s. So still some really nice rowing happening amongst these crews in the last 500 meters, but these crews are still well off the pace of one another here because of such the distances between these crews from start to finish. So Clark leading as they are now in the last 250 meters of the race, about 30 strokes to go for the Clark crew. Vermont starting to enter that red buoyed zone as well, really trying to chase down Clark, but not enough water and left in the race for Vermont to really make a big move here to catch Clark in this third level final. And following them, we do have Conn College chasing down Vermont. Just a few lengths of open water back. And a few lengths back from Conn College, we do have Mount Holyoke over in lane 5. And then a few lengths of open water back, we have Middleburry in lane 2. So lots of open water separating each of these 5 crews from one another. And we do have Clark is now through the finish line as the first finisher in this third level final. Following them is Vermont, just a few strokes to go for this Vermont team. And a really well-rowed race by all 5 of these crews in this final. A really nice job. Second time racing today. It can be a lot on an athlete's body to race twice in one day. So really great job today from all the athletes in this race and all the other events we've witnessed here today. And we do now have Mount Holyoke crossing through the line, and in just a few strokes we will have Middleburry through the line as well to round out the field of this third level final for the women's second varsity 8s. And Middleburry is through the line, so we're going to head back up to the DRC with Dave to start watching the women's second varsity petite level final.
The second varsity petite final for the women is underway. WPI in 1, Bowdoin in 2, Coast Guard in 3, Wellesley in 4, Smith in 5, and Bates College in lane 6 with the lead. At 250 meters, it's Bates, and the rest of the pack seems very close together. Perhaps in the far lane, WPI maybe a little bit ahead. Hard to tell from this angle. Not much in it other than Bates having a deck length out in front. .350 meters in, it's Bates by a third of a length. Over Smith, then Wellesley, Coast Guard, Bowdoin, and WPI. From lane 6 to lane 1 is the order. First in lane 6, second and 5, and so on right across the line. Let's get the call from on the race course.
Here we are riding with the petite final of the women's 2v8. And it is highly unusual for us to be seeing the likes of Bates College, Smith, Wellesley, and WPI featuring in a B-level final. But here we are, and such is the state of women's D3 rowing that this is what we're seeing with the competitive level for these crews and teams with such high pedigree. So as we're looking out on the field, it is Bates College that is featuring early on with a nice lead that they have established for themselves over Smith. It looks like Bates Coxon is just able to look right over and see that Smith bow ball, and that's a very handy lead to have there in the Bobcat boat on the near side of the course. But across the rest of the field, wow, look at all that overlap that we have between Smith, Wellesley, Coast Guard, Bowdoin, and WPI. It does look like Smith is just getting the better of everybody else right now, with Coast Guard maybe just having that next best place, duking it out with Wellesley in the middle of the course, but it's really back and forth between Coast Guard and Wellesley there in the middle of the course. That is going to be the WPI and the Bowdoin crews that are starting to trail off the back of the race course a little bit. But here we are looking at Bates again over on the near side of the course, and they are continuing just to extend that lead with that cool rhythm there. Stroke seat just really looking like she knows exactly what she wants to happen every single stroke, and 7 seat just backing her up. I think the Bobcats really have this race well in hand at this point. Smith looking like they are just happy to hang on to that margin just about where they're at, checking the Bobcats just at about a boat length of lead that they have. And Smith is just going to have to focus on the field behind them because it is going to be really tight racing between themselves and Wellesley and Coast Guard. Wellesley and Coast Guard still going just about stroke for stroke, maybe a bow ball between them at this point. Smith just sitting at about 2 or 3 seats advantage over Coast Guard and Wellesley. Looking at the Bobcat boat, it does still look like they are just happy to just jam out in that rhythm. Stroke seat and 7 seats still just really commanding the rhythm. Everyone just falling in behind and looking like they're able to use that power, use that stroke rate just to sit right at about just the seat of open water now, just creeping and extending that margin just really subtly. No major move from the Bobcat boat, but it looks like they have it really well in hand at this point. Smith also looking like they're just starting to use this base rhythm in order to extend their lead that they have over this midfield battle between Wellesley and Coast Guard. Coast Guard looking like they're also starting to drop off the speed. The Wellesley speed might just be a little bit too hot for them as we're going through the middle of the race course. Wellesley just hanging on to about a half a length deficit between themselves and Smith. Wellesley in that third place position behind Smith. Smith behind Bates here still. Does look like the margins have neutralized a little bit. It is still just Bates holding that 1 seat of open water over Smith. Smith still sitting at about a half a length. Maybe they've gotten about another seat on Wellesley. Wellesley just sitting at about 2 or 3 seats up on Coast Guard. Coast Guard is looking like they've established themselves about a length ahead of the trailing 2 boats from Bowdoin and WPI, with Bowdoin just getting over WPI by a seat or 2 at the back of the pack. Just heard a really nasty call here from the Smith coxswain. She is urging her crew on as she just called bow ball on the Wellesley crew, who are sitting in that third place position, really getting in and digging deep into the lungs this Smith coxswain in order to drive her crew on and see if she can't use that energy to close this gap between themselves and the Bobcats. Bobcats look like they're just happy to respond to that call from that coxswain, because no doubt they heard it. And it looks like they are just happy to keep driving at that 1 seat of open water margin as they come into the last 500. I think they're pretty happy with the position that they've established for themselves. Smith just moving ahead of Wellesley now.